Okay, recording has started. Welcome one and all to the special general meeting of WUSA today, the 25th of May. So we will come to order at 5:15 p.m. Waterloo time. A couple of housekeeping items. We'll proceed to the territorial acknowledgement. So we acknowledge that our work takes place on the traditional territory of the neutral Anishinaabe and Haudenosaunee peoples. Waterloo is situated on the Haldeman Tract, land granted to the Six Nations, which includes 6 miles on each side of the Grand River. Of course, as we're gathered electronically, I encourage all members present to reflect on the relationship that they have to the lands they find themselves on, and how perhaps to reflect on how colonialism continues to shape the world in which we live. That brings us next to approval of the agenda. Before I read the motion, I'm going to go through a couple of housekeeping items about how we will sort of administer the meeting. So first, the meeting is being held electronically, despite a provision in the existing bylaws that it be held in a physical location determined by the board of directors in the region of Waterloo. There is currently a temporary regulation under the Ontario Nonprofit Corporations Act, which permits corporations to hold electronic meetings through the 30th of September this year, hence how we are doing this meeting. When we get to the item on approval of the new WUSA bylaws, I will yield the chair to our former Vice President Education, Matthew Garretts, who has done a lot for this organization and is certainly well up to speed in the administration of a meeting according to Robert's rules. A note on proxy votes is that they will be counted automatically, except for those where discretion has been granted to for a proxy holder to vote on amendments which may arise on a given item. If it is required, we'll ask these proxy holders to indicate their votes via an email to Mike Semeta, MCIMETTA at wusa.ca. Perhaps Mike can put that email in the chat for us. And we'll open voting probably for a period of about 3 to 5 minutes to make sure that all those votes are properly counted. A note on quorum and adjournment of the meeting. So if this meeting is to lose quorum, we will immediately adjourn and end the call. And the meeting will adjourn at 7 p.m. sharp unless there is a motion from members at this meeting to extend that adjournment time. Then a final note on sort of chat etiquette is that it is open for all of you to use, but we ask that it only be used for points of order, information, or privilege. In other words, if the rules aren't being followed and you need to bring that to my attention, or if there is something that you need to know, point of inquiry might be something like something that, like, there's an acronym being used and you don't know it, and something that you need to know in order to be able to participate in the discussion. And then a point of privilege might be that you are unable to hear, or something that is preventing you from participating. So that's kind of the big housekeeping. So I see Alora has raised a point of information. When will meeting minutes be made available? Likely at the annual general meeting, but I'll say that this, okay. So typically meeting minutes from a general meeting are made available at the subsequent annual general meeting. So it's likely that they will be presented to the membership at the annual general meeting in March or April of 2023. William has another point of information about the adjournment time set to 8 p.m. that may be the case that it's erroneously given there. On the agenda document itself, it's listed at 7 p.m. I apologize for the inconsistency, but the document which was approved by the board had 7 p.m. listed, so we are going to go with that time. Though if the meeting so desires, we can extend that time. It will just require a formal decision. So apologies for the confusion on that. So that brings us to our first item of business, which is a motion to approve the agenda, which I shall now read. Be it resolved that the general meeting approve the agenda as presented. Is there a member present willing to move that? I see Laura has raised a hand and Matthew has seconded. So thank you both. And I actually failed to mention this. For the speaking order, we will be using the raise hand function. So the chat is for sort of interruptions from that. But if you wish to speak, raise your hand and we'll get to you. Okay, so is there anybody who would wish to speak to? Thanks, Laura. So this is an example. You can raise your hand and I'll call on you to speak, and you can move an amendment if you wish. Please go ahead, Laura.
Hi, I'd like to move that we switch the order of agenda items number 4 and number 5.
Thanks, Laura. Is there anybody present willing to second this motion? I see Sonia has raised a hand to second. So we'll lower all the hands. So there is now a motion to amend the motion to approve the agenda, which would swap the order of approval of the new bylaws and the member proposal on COVID-19 public health measures. So we'll debate this motion. So Matthew, would you like to speak to it?
Is the motioner able to speak first? Is that normal?
Yes, that would be typical practice. So Laura, if you would like to speak to the reasoning behind your motion, you can please go ahead now.
Thank you. Yes. I have moved this motion because at the last AGM that we had, there was a similar motion on similar topics, which failed to reach quorum, and quorum was lost halfway through the meeting. The student newspaper Imprint actually announced that this motion would be, the old motion would be present at the next meeting, but I was informed by the chair that Imprint was incorrect. So this new motion is here at this meeting, and I have proposed switching the order because I know the new WUSA bylaws are very important to discuss. So I anticipate we'll have quorum for those bylaws. I also want to make sure that we don't lose quorum before we reach what is currently question number 5. So that's why I've suggested to switch them around so we can talk to everything on this meeting. Thank you.
Thanks, Laura. And just a note, Vincent, we're using the raise hand function, so if you wish to speak, please raise your hand in that way. And it's come to my attention that if presenters raise their hand, so Catherine has raised a hand, I don't see it in the list of attendees, which might be, actually, wait, okay, this might be better. Okay, now I see it. Okay, so Nicholas, please go ahead. Oh, actually, sorry, pardon me. Matthew was first. I apologize.
Thank you very much. Nick, you get to go next. This is very commonly comes to general meetings. I don't know that I've actually been to a general meeting where the agenda wasn't attempted to be amended at the start, but I also have never been to a general meeting where I think that it actually was amended. I can't recall. But I'm always opposed to this sort of thing because a lot of people read the agenda, and based on the things in the agenda, you can come a little bit late, you can come a little, you can leave early, you can plan your schedule for the things that you care about and the things that you don't care about a little bit. So I really think it's unfair to members that are not present right now, but that were expecting to be present for later items to start reorganizing the agenda. I think that it's important that we just sort of keep it as is, as was emailed to everybody and presented to everybody. It keeps it most predictable as possible. And I think that that's the most important thing for students to be able to engage fairly. Thanks.
Thanks, Matthew. Next is Nicholas.
I'd like to speak against this motion. I think it is important that we address concerns in the order that has been presented by the Board of Directors. It makes sense for our meeting order, and I feel that our bylaw motion will have a more important long-term impact, and that the loss of quorum is more important to consider for the new bylaw rather than the later motion.
Thanks, Nicholas. Finally, we have Vincent.
Yeah, I struggle to understand why losing quorum at the last meeting means we should move it forward. If we lose quorum as soon as we get to an item, that means that students don't consider the item worthwhile or worth discussing. And so, if that's different now, then we won't lose quorum. But if it's still the case that students think the motion isn't discussing, then we should let it lose quorum and not discuss it. The reason we have quorum is to prevent a small minority of students from being able to ram through changes through the corporation, and we should keep the agenda in place and not try to manipulate the agenda order to try to allow a minority of students to pass something that a majority of students does not want.
Thanks, Vincent. And there were a couple of points in the chat. Your mic is rather gainy. If I was able to understand what you said, I think, I'm not sure if that's universally true, but if you might be able to access a higher quality microphone, it would be advised, I guess I'll say.
Any better?
It's intelligible, but there's just background noise.
Okay.
Okay, so that I do believe exhausts the speaking list for the motion to amend the agenda by swapping items 4 and 5. So we will bring the motion to a vote. And given that this is I'll finish what I'm saying. Vincent, I'll take your point of inquiry.
Does my mic work now?
Sounds much better.
Cool.
So, okay. Given that this is a motion which has arisen and those who have decided to vote by proxy have not been able to give a specific intent on this, those who are holding proxies will vote for those proxies by emailing Mike Sameta. Might be easiest administratively to reply to the email by which he assigned the proxies earlier today. Otherwise, we will ask those in favor of amending the agenda to raise your hand now, and we'll keep it open for, I don't know, approximately 30 seconds. So when it reaches 5:30, according to the clock I see in front of me, we'll close the affirmations and count them there, and then we'll sort of wait until 5:34 to email Mike. Okay, so I count 15 in favor of amending the agenda. Please lower hands. To be clear, the voting period will last until 5:34, but that doesn't mean that you'll have until 5:34 to vote in favor. That's when, by the time at 5:34, hopefully we will have had all 3 types of votes cast. If there are concerns, I can ask the question affirmatively again. So we'll give a full minute. Those in favor of amending the agenda to switch the items 4 and 5, raise your hand now and you'll have until 5:32. Give you a full 60 seconds. So raise your hand in favor of amending the agenda. And just as a matter of good practice, please try to refrain from using the chat for points of inquiry while we're conducting a vote. So raising hands in favor of amending the agenda. There'll be 15 seconds remaining. Okay, so I count presently 16 for. Those opposed to, so please lower hands if I think that can be done en masse. So those opposed to amending the agenda, raise your hand now. And pardon me for not having the clock up immediately. We'll give it until another 30 seconds. So till 20 seconds past 5:32. These are voting against amending the agenda. Raise your hand now. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, so I am unable to count beyond the 19, which it provides me. So
it's Ben, it's 34. You can just see the number on the top. It's anyone who has raised their hand, it gives you a gist up there.
Thank you, Pratik. Okay, so 34 against. Please lower hands. And those wishing to abstain this vote. So those abstaining, raise your hands now, and you'll have until 45 seconds past 5:34. Okay. I believe the number is fixed at 4, abstaining. Mike, could I ask you to count the votes you've received by email?
I have 14 against, 3 in favor so far.
Okay, so we said we would cut it off at 5:34 and we've gone a minute over that. So it appears to me that the motion to amend the agenda has failed by a count of 48 against, 19 in favor, and 4 abstentions. So the motion to amend the agenda fails. We are back to the main motion, which you can read on your screen. Be it resolved that the general meeting approve the agenda as presented. Was moved by Laura Deering and seconded by Matthew Schwartz. Does anybody else wish to speak to the main motion to approve the agenda as presented? Okay, so in this instance, when we do a vote, we won't need to do the yes, Sahil, point of order. If somebody could unmute them.
Please raise your hand so you just get at the top. It would be the easiest.
Should be able to. Oh, excellent.
I wanted to clarify that Elora did intend to move the motion, as she did respond saying that she actually wanted to propose the amendment. So I don't know if she actually meant to propose the agenda as it was.
Thanks, Sahil. So she, sorry, assuming pronouns, Elora did move the main motion, which was seconded by Matthew. Elora subsequently moved an amendment, but moving doesn't necessarily give an intention of being in favor or against something. At this point, it is too late to withdraw having moved it. The motion belongs to the assembly at this point. Elora has a point of inquiry.
Point of clarification, I clarified right after I'd raised my hand that I did indeed intend only to make an amendment, but not move the original motion.
Okay. Nevertheless, I understood. I asked if there was a mover. You raised your hand. You have been considered the mover of the motion. You're free to vote as you wish on the vote that we are about to proceed to. At this point, the motion belongs to the assembly, so it's sort of too late. For future reference, when I ask if somebody wants to, when I ask for a mover to a motion, the first hand I see will be considered the mover. The next will be the second. Irrespective of your intent to move amendments or to vote in favor or against or to abstain a motion. That said, we will now proceed to a vote on the approval of the agenda. Now, given that this motion was has not been amended, we won't do the email business. We will do sort of 60 seconds for those in favor, 60 seconds for those against, 60 seconds for abstentions. So I will ask those in favor of approving the agenda as presented to please raise your hand now, and you will have until 30 seconds past 5:39 p.m. Fifteen seconds remaining. Okay. I count 31 in favor, if I'm not mistaken.
It's 30.
30 in favor. Okay, those opposed to approving the agenda as presented, please raise your hand now, and you'll have until 45 seconds past 5:40. Russ, I will address this after we conclude the vote. So once again, these are raise your hand to vote against approving the agenda as presented. Okay. I see 12 hands raised against, so I will note that. Now, please lower hands. And those wishing to abstain the vote, raise your hand now, and you'll have until, we'll say, until 30 seconds past 5:41. Twenty seconds remaining. Okay, please lower hands. So the motion carries by a vote of 30, 12, 4. We proceed now. So the motion carries. The agenda has been approved as presented. We proceed now to item 4, approval of the new WUSA bylaws. And I will yield the chair to Matthew Garretts at this point. Oh, pardon me. Actually, before I maybe perhaps Matthew, you could respond to Russ's question, point of inquiry about the types of points that are to be raised in chat and those where one should raise their hand.
Excellent. I will probably just do my entire intro, and Russ, hopefully your point will be clarified there. Catherine has also just basically covered it. Points of information, points of privilege, and points of order are the 3 points that are typically accepted, and they are basically as are presented there, with a slight modification I would give to points of information, which are usually used to refer to what kind of motion is on the floor and parliamentary procedure, rather than just asking for information broadly. The motion, there is no currently pending motion. Ben, you're probably going to want to introduce a motion yourself to appoint me as chair, because you didn't actually add that to the agenda, though.
That's fair enough. I guess I assumed it as a reserve power to appoint a chair, but perhaps that's not proper. That said, we have just approved the agenda. The board of directors was aware of the fact that you would be chairing this item. So I'm.
You can move
Okay.
another motion with a 2/3 thing if an agenda is already approved.
Okay. Very well.
Really
Then Then I will move that the general meeting appoint Matthew Garretts as temporary chair of the general meeting for the motion for the item on approval of new WUSA bylaws. And I see that Matthew has seconded that motion. So this is, I guess the motivation to do this is that the chair of a meeting is supposed to be sort of a neutral figure, and I think it probably would benefit the assembly for me to be able to speak sort of more freely about the governance review process in its entirety, from the perspective of the executive team and the board of directors, in a way that is difficult for me to do while also chairing the meeting. And of course, Matthew's experience with Robert's rules and with this organization in particular is places him well to support us in this way. So I guess so. Okay, so there's a motion on the floor. Does anybody wish to speak to the motion? The motion being to appoint Matthew Garretts as chair for the approval of new WUSA bylaws. Yes, Matthew Schwartz seconded the motion. Okay, so I don't see any other discussion on this motion. So we will take it to a vote. And similarly, those holding proxies with the ability to vote using their discretion will be able to submit a vote to email the proxy votes to Mike Sameta. We'll say by 5:51, so about 5 minutes from now. And in any case, we will go to those in favor of appointing Matthew Garretts as temporary chair. Please raise your hand now, and we'll give you until 5:47, a little shy of 60 seconds. Twenty seconds remaining to vote in favor of appointing Matthew Garretts as the temporary chair. Okay, I count 39 votes in favor. Those opposed, so please lower hands. And I actually believe it may have gone up to like 41 by the time so I'll record 41. Those opposed to appointing Matthew Garretts as temporary chair, please raise your hand now, and we'll give you until 30 seconds past 5:48 p.m. So once again, this is those voting against appointing Matthew Garretts as temporary chair. Okay, the number of votes appears to have leveled out. So I will call it at 2 opposed, which brings us to those, so please lower hands, and those abstaining from, those wishing to abstain from this vote, please raise your hand now, and we'll give you a little over 30 seconds. Okay, so I count 3 abstentions, and we'll go to Mike to ask for any proxy votes.
17 in favor, 1 abstaining.
Okay, so then so the motion carries beyond the 2/3 threshold with 58 in favor, 2 opposed, and 4 abstaining. So I yield the chair to Matthew Garretts, who can perhaps do a brief introduction and sort of how you prefer to moderate the meeting.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for having me today. I'd like to thank the president for welcoming me. I just want to give a couple brief remarks before we get underway. First of all, I will say I am possibly a tad rustier, so we will see how that goes, but I do have my Robert's rules here. So as I find most successful moderators of meetings like this do, I will say that the level of reliance on Robert's rules is something I am happy to keep at a kind of your typical minimum without getting too fancy, but the more that people engage it, the more that I am willing to dial up and adhere to the rules strictly to the letter, just with the caveat that that will come with a longer meeting and more time with me referencing the rule book. So please keep that in mind. To my knowledge, there are no special rules regarding this meeting, so that defaults everyone to having a chance to speak twice to any motion or subsidiary motion. So what that means, for those who may not understand that, is that if there is a motion to amend something, chances are you're going to be able to speak to it a maximum of 2 times. Each of those times you can take up to 10 minutes. However, you don't need to take up to 10 minutes. A couple of things that I think will probably make things go more smoothly. I don't like having people doing immediate responses. If somebody disagrees with something or wants to answer a question that someone posed, I typically don't permit that unless the person who asked the question is allocating some of those 10 minutes to somebody to answer it. And if that is the case, then I will be happy to accept somebody who has technical expertise to jump in. But I would ask whoever is speaking to something, if they have a question, please say that you are ending your speaking time so that somebody else can speak to answer your question. I also think that when it comes to speaking lists, I won't roll speaking lists over. So if we have a list for a main motion and then we have an amendment, we'll just start the speaking list anew. That is probably going to be easiest for everyone. I will do my best to note the speaking list for a main motion if we do an amendment and then come back to the main. And as we go, we might find that there's some things with online meetings, of course, that normally work in an in-person session, but don't work in an online session. And I will, again, just adjust as we go. Finally, if I do say your name incorrectly, or if I use wrong pronouns, just please do let me know so that I can correct that going forward. And I think that is all. At this point, we will continue with the agenda. The approved agenda has us moving to the main motion that you can see on the screen before you. We require a mover and a seconder before we proceed, so I will wait for those. Excellent. Moved by Matthew Schwartz and seconded by Benjamin Easton. Matthew, would you like to speak to the motion?
There's just a POI in the chat, I think, about some of your tools you went over there, so they might want to.
Excellent. I can only have the people tab or the chat tab open at one point, so I very much appreciate that. Are there any changes from the presented bylaws at the previous meeting of the General Assembly? My understanding is that the bylaws are on the website. You can check that. However, this time, perhaps I will let the mover and seconder speak to have their speaking turns, and hopefully that answer will come out at that point. Alora, I will thank you very much. I will move back to that. For each amendment, can someone speak twice? Yes. So say we have the main motion, somebody wants to amend something within the motion, then they can speak twice on the amendment and twice on the main motion, though they would use one of those times to move the amendment if they were the one who moved it. Point of information, can we split our 2 by 10 minutes and allocate some of that time for answering questions? Speak for 8 minutes, have 2 minutes for answering questions that come up later. That is a very good question. The way that I prefer to do it is that answering questions comes out of the person who asked the questions time, not your own time. Because I suspect that many of the questions will be fielded specifically to the president, and I would worry if we followed this particular model that you outlined here, that we would run into him running out of speaking time, and possibly we have many people in this meeting who would not have their their questions be able to answer. So I take it out of the questioner's time, not the speakers. Usually the 10 minutes thing doesn't get involved, but I will be timing just in case, but usually people are faster at answering than that. Are there any points of information that I have missed? There's no motion on the floor right now. The heal I think that point of order is covered. All right. Thank you, Laura. So we will proceed. Sorry about that, and thank you for asking your questions. That was one more thing that I forgot to say. Obviously, for a lot of people here, Robert's Rules is not, something that you're expected to know in its entirety. So if things do come up that you don't understand that are going on with procedure, then using a point of information or asking someone you know, possibly a counselor from your faculty who is present, might help you answer your questions. Or Google can also often be helpful in that respect, I will say. So we will proceed. Sorry about that. Matthew, you are the mover, so would you like to speak to this first?
Sure, thank you very much. So thank you everybody for being here. This is quite a monumentous sort of item to go forward. And as people involved with the process will know, people from council, people that have gotten involved in this process, this is something that is almost a constant year's work of work coming, and many more little bits of work prior to that. So these coming forward are the new bylaws, but I think Ben's probably the best one to speak most fulsomely to them. So I'll go ahead and let him go.
Ben, you are recognized as the next in the speaking order. If anybody would like to be added to the speaking list, do feel free to put up your hand.
Thanks, Matthew. Yes, so as you will see in the motion text, this governance review process really originated as a commitment from our 2020 to 2025 strategic plan. It was highlighted again in our annual plan. The long-range plan had a commitment to do a governance and an equity audit. It's in fact in the same bullet point. So this year we've really undertaken sort of the first part of that, which is dealing with our governance structure. So really how the organization is designed sort of at a high level. The main difference in these bylaws from the existing ones, of course, is that we have merged our Students' Council and Board of Directors into a single governing body elected annually by the membership. That board will have 13 members, including a president and a vice president, and then 11 directors elected at large by the membership. The idea to move to this model came on the advice of some subject matter experts in governance generally, but also in the student union sector. And I'm convinced that this will help us address a lot of the issues that we observe in this organization. The clarity of responsibilities between board and council, sort of siloing student leaders into different areas, having a substantial number of uncompetitive elections, allowing students to vote in a manner more representative of their needs by having a single pool of at-large candidates rather than faculty-specific candidates. Although through the process of approving these bylaws at Students' Council and the Board of Directors, we've arrived at a compromise to retain some of the features of the existing model that students believe serve them well, like having specific representatives from your faculty at the table who you can feel comfortable approaching about the issues that might be more unique to your circumstances. So this is through our sort of faculty guarantee election scheme, which will provide that so long as one candidate from each faculty runs, there will be one candidate. There will be one director from each faculty on the board at the end of the election. Otherwise, it's a single transferable vote election where there's basically runoffs. So that is sort of the governance review piece. And I will say that this is really sort of the start of a process and solidifying a structure. you'll recall at the start of my remarks, I mentioned there was also a commitment in our long-range plan to do an equity audit. I am pleased to report that the board has sort of reaffirmed our intent to do this, and we're currently we're trying to sort of solicit a proposal from a firm to support us in the questions of sort of how our vision is like operationalized in these like really critical questions of how we have, you know, an equitable organization that is inclusive to all students at this university. So this is really sort of the first step. Subsequent to this, of course, we'll have, provided that the members confirm the new bylaws, we intend to open nominations for an election period tomorrow to run through the month of June. The new bylaws will come into force on the 1st of September, and we'll have sort of a transition period through the summer for those successful candidates. This is, as Matthew sort of mentioned earlier, this has been, you know, this is kind of the culmination of 8 months or more of work, and student leaders have done their due diligence to make sure that these changes are in the best interest of the organization. And sort of to address Nicholas's question about have these, are the bylaws that have been presented here different from any other iteration presented at the general meeting? I don't believe that the bylaws have been presented at all to a general meeting, so I suppose can't really answer that, but I will say that the text that is available on the website is what has been approved by both Students' Council and the Board of Directors through, I believe Council did 3 readings of the bylaws and iterations and amendments, and the board saw it several times as well and approved it at the end of last month. So that's a lot. Happy to take any questions or just be a resource to the discussion. But I guess I'll say I hope that you vote in favor of this, as the board and council have both recommended to the membership.
Thank you, Ben. Our speaking list is currently empty, just in the interest of not excellent. We do have somebody. Abhiraj?
Thank you. Thank you, Matthew. Can everyone hear me? Yeah, so I do have some concerns regarding this motion, and I will have some points and some questions throughout this, hopefully some which can be answered. So first of all, my biggest issue, and this is something I mentioned during the last GM as well, is that the way this process has taken place, like as you mentioned, that this is a process that's been ongoing for over 8 months now. However, for the most part, the student body is not being consulted. Like those of us who aren't actively trying to remain updated with what WUSA is doing aren't even necessarily aware of what the changes are. And I understand that GM is supposed to be a democratic body, which should consider, like, because of which this can be considered a democratic decision. But with seeing that GM turnout is always so low, I think it would have been a good faith move would have been to look at ways to involve more students in this change. Such a major change being made in such a way would make, like, many students, in my opinion, it would make them feel excluded, and that would feed to the apathy and antipathy that is already highly present towards WUSA, which for large part I think is unfair. Like a lot of the apathy which is there towards WUSA, but this would feed towards it. Another concern I have is that this. So as the previous exec mentioned in the previous GM, that the organization, and I'm paraphrasing, but the organization's best interests may not always be the students' best interests. Since in this new system there would not be a board and only, like, since there would only be a board or only like one body, which would make the directors legally responsible for voting in the best interest of the organization. There's no one to look out for students, and when there are decisions to be made which could potentially be which could potentially be on an issue where the organization's best interests and the students' best interests don't overlap. That is another one of my concerns. Again, the other thing is a smaller body with 13 students. 13 students and only 2 full-time execs. So 13 students, a lot of whom, most of whom will be full-time students during this, and 2 full-time execs. I'm not sure how effective that would be. I also have one question regarding this being voted on right now. So I understand, and this is something I just want to just clarify it, because I'm sure this is something not only that I'm unsure about, but I also think this is something other students may be unaware or unsure about, is that I understand, so the GM, along with students, full-time staff members of WUSA also vote. So I was wondering how many full-time staff members and not students would be voting, and how are the bylaws affecting them? Because if and correct me if I'm wrong, but because I understand there are about 50 to 60 full-time staff members, which means to get a 2/3 majority, only about 10 to 20 students would be required, and that is again something which is a little concerning to me. Again, open to responses. I have not decided my vote is going to be, because if the discussion is like it's really possible for my vote to change based on the discussion. It's just based on the concerns I've mentioned right now. I am currently leaning towards voting no. Thank you.
All right, there was a question there. I would invite, I think, either Matt or Ben to speak very quickly to the number of people here and answer that question directly. Thank you.
I suppose I can. So it's correct that we have about 40 plus full-time staff. I do believe most are present or have otherwise registered to vote by proxy. In the existing bylaws, they are fully members, and I guess I'll acknowledge that this is an unusual. It puts staff in an unusual position, and it's one of the in the new bylaws. This will not be the case. It's been identified as sort of a tricky subject area, I'll say.
Thank you, Ben. All right, the next person I have on the speaking list is Alora.
Hello, thank you. I would like to move to put the question so that we can speak to everything on the agenda, seeing as the speaking list is rather short.
We have a subsidiary motion to call the question. Is there a seconder for that motion? We have Sonia. Can somebody unmute Sonia, please? I don't think you have a mic, so I'm just confirming that you are seconding. If you are seconding, please just put it in the chat very quickly if you're capable.
I am seconding, yeah.
Excellent, thank you. All right, so to explain what is going on, a motion to call the question is a motion that instantly ends debate. Anyone else left on the speaking list is removed from the speaking list, and we immediately move to a vote on the motion at hand. That motion at hand is that one on the screen to approve the bylaws. There is no debate on the motion to call the question, so we are going to begin voting now. I am going to do the same voting procedure as Ben. So we will give 4 minutes for this vote. Starting now for the first 60 seconds, in-person individuals, please feel free to raise your hand to indicate that you are in favor of ending debate. And this will go until 15 seconds past 6:11. And those who have proxies, please do send them to Mike Smeta for his counting. Thank you. All right, with approximately 15 seconds left for anybody wishing to end debate now. I will also remind people that this requires a 2/3 vote in the affirmative. All right, thank you. We have a couple more trickling in, 13, 14, 15. We have 19 votes in favor. Could all those voting in favor please lower their hands? Could those opposed to ending debate, please raise their hands. And we will go to 30 seconds after 6:12. And we are voting on ending debate on the current question. Anybody who is raising their hand now or those who are opposed to ending debate? Five seconds more. I'm seeing 21 against. We will now start 1 minute for those choosing to note their abstention. We will go until 45 seconds past 6:13. You can lower your hands if you're opposed, and you can raise your hands if you're abstaining. In the future, I might actually not have a voting period for people who are abstaining. If you want to abstain, you can just not vote at all. For this one, at least we will continue. And whoever is going and making sure that the people who have their speaking turn is getting unmuted, thank you so much. The chair, it is very nice to not have to be able to do that. So whichever other presenter is doing that, thank you.
Sorry, I was counting email. How many were against in the meeting? How many votes were against?
We are currently 19 in favor, 21 against, and in about 5 seconds we will have 2 abstaining. Could you please indicate what votes you have received by proxy?
7. In favor of ending debate, 5. Against ending debate, 7.
I declare the motion failed. We will continue with speaking. Matthew Schwartz, this is your second speaking turn.
Thank you very much. I just wanted to speak to some of Abaraj's concerns that he raised. I believe number one on sort of his list of items was about how involved students were in this process and the consultation and such. And you know what, I to a degree I can see it, but I think that we put really as much into getting students involved and getting students aware as we could. From the beginning of this process, we've been putting out articles and details about this process, on our website that are explaining the thought behind it, what's currently going on, what the steps ahead are. These have in turn been put on our social channels, as well as I believe sent out in mass emails to all students. So every student had this, sent right to their inbox. Additionally, this meeting invite, or this meeting with the agenda and with all the details has gone to every student's inbox, and the details of this whole process. And that's, before you get into the processes happen at council, or when me and Ben went around to every student society and presented individually to their bodies so we could get a better sense on the ground of those student societies. So I think that we did put a lot of effort into it, and I get it. governance is not interesting for students. I'm not surprised at that fact, and I don't think that's a controversial thing to admit. But I don't think that general meeting attendance is necessarily a good proxy for students' knowledge, because that depends if students think it's something important for them to speak to as an individual. If you see something on the agenda that you're all right with going forward and such, then why would you come to the meeting? And I think that's a motivation that is in some people's minds. I know it is in some of my friends' minds, and why they're not here as much as I tried to get them here for quorum purposes. So I think that there has been a lot of effort on WUSA's part to get students involved as much as possible. I don't think that there's a lot more that could have been done, really, while keeping this process, responsible and guided by our students' council that are representative of students, and relying on the governance consultants that we hired to help us out in sort of building out a good system. Going on to, I believe, what your other things were. There was one about the 13-member body and concerns it was too small to really work effectively. And you know what? That's actually what I thought right off the bat initially when that was the recommendation that came from our governance consultants. If you take a look through the report that we were given by those consultants, it recommended a 13-member body. And that was the biggest thing I had one of the initial questions about was, okay, 13 members is not a lot. We got 35,000 students. Why does that make sense? And in conversations with the governance consultants, when they came to our council and spoke about it, when I had a chance to talk with them about it, it was about really the latest sort of academic research into governance and what all those best practices mean and what they involve is not in having large bodies, and that actually as the size of some amount like our membership grows, you actually don't really want to grow the body proportionally to it because the body becomes dysfunctional. There's a size at which it becomes you start having people that think a little bit more into the background. They aren't as involved in engaged in debate. You want a small, lean body that can sort of respond quickly to student needs, is in a position to everybody get involved and bring their voices forward, but it's still large enough to have a good amount of diversity on that board. So they recommended, if you want to get higher, you could go to like a 15, but they really didn't recommend it. They urged us to stay at a 13, which is why it's come forward at a 13. That's what sort of the academic literature says. And then I believe I didn't take down any other points. I missed them, but I hope that's a little bit of information behind what's gone into this process and why that 13-member body's come forward. Thanks.
Thank you, Matthew. If you currently have your hands up, you can lower them. You are on my speaking list. I'd like to go through the back order of points that were raised in the chat. First of all, I was wondering if I could ask for a volunteer from those among presenter view, those who can unmute their mics autonomously. I would very much appreciate if there was someone who could monitor for points through this meeting and interrupt me if there are points, because those are supposed to interrupt conversation typically, and that's why they should be used sparingly. But I can't see them. Is there somebody perhaps among the presenters who can volunteer to do that on behalf of your fellow individuals?
Yes, sorry, I just
members?
realized it doesn't make sense for me to put it in chat. I'm able to do so.
Thank you, Catherine. All right, we will go through the back order here, starting with Vincent. I believe you had a point of order at 6:10 p.m.
Withdraw, but I'd like to be added to the speaking list.
You are on the speaking list next. We will get to you in a moment. Laura, I think we addressed your point of information. As to your point of personal privilege, can the chat be closed during the vote? I don't know about the technical capability of doing that. I would not like to stress out whoever is administering this in the background into consistently turning that on and off. I also don't know if it'll cause issues, especially for those who typically you're not actually supposed to raise points of information during a vote, but sometimes people do get confused as to what is being voted on if things go very quickly, which I try to avoid. So I would prefer to keep them open, but yes, you should not be mentioning anything substantive in the meeting chat at all, let alone during voting. Cameron, there is no limitation to the number of points of information that somebody can submit. And I think that brings us, Sonia, thank you for your point, and Alora, thank you as well. can I ask then, I do not know.
Sorry, Matthew. Yes,
if
just
it's- yeah.
I'm able to do that. So whenever we call the question, I will make sure that it is the chat is muted.
Excellent. Thank you very much. And thank you to those who raised that opportunity. Isn't it nice when we can solve problems together? All right, Vincent, I have added you a second time to the speaking list if that is what you desire. But it is your speaking turn now. We are caught up, I believe. So go ahead, and if you would like me to add you to the speaking list again, just please indicate that in your speech.
I'd like to, I guess, agree with most of what Abaraj was saying. I agree there were a lot of issues with the process that this governance review went through. While there were a lot of consultations, I think consultations need to be more than just telling people what you're doing. You need to, actively engage in people and listen to what their responses are. There's, definitely problems with the new proposed governance model. But I also think despite all that, it's better than what we currently have. And the problems in the suggested model are easier to fix than the problems we currently have. So, even though I'm not very happy with the entire proposed model or the process we took to get here, we'll probably be in a better place, and then we can work to fix the remaining issues of, I guess next year and the year after once we've tried this a bit. But because of I think what Abaraj was saying about the process that this went through, I'm personally going to be abstaining, and yeah, I yield the rest of my time.
I was muted. Thank you. Thank you, Vincent. The next on the speaking list is Edward. Edward, you're recognized for 10 minutes. Is there someone who can unmute Edward?
Edward, do you mind raising your hand? It's just easier to find you. Yep, you have mic privileges.
Edward, you can unmute yourself. All right, we'll give Edward another 10 seconds to see if this resolves. If not, we will put him after the next person.
Edward has said that their Teams is acting up and says that you can move on.
Excellent. All right, I will not count that as a speaking turn, and if he wishes to be added to the speaking list again, he may simply raise his hand. All right, I have Alora, you're recognized for your second speaking turn, unless that was to raise your points, in which case we will also strike you.
Thank you. If Edward, I can give him a few more minutes if he wants to get Teams issues sorted, but I see that there's no more people on the speaking list, so I would like to move to call the question again.
We actually, before that point, I will recognize your motion, but we do have, for people's information, we do have 4 more people on the speaking list: Nicholas, Kanan, Sahil, and Ben. But we do have a motion. I will give people a moment to have a seconder raise their hand, and I'll give you 5 seconds to lower your hand if you're one of the 2 people there. Sonia, we have raised a hand as a second. All right, we have a valid motion to call the question.
A point of order, Matthew.
Point of order, yes, that is, yes, go ahead, pose your point of order.
Is it in order for us to reconsider a motion which has previously failed on the same agenda item?
Yes, we can do that on calling the question. There is no debate on this question. We have another point of order. The point of order is from Alora. Alora, you're raising a point of order.
Point of order on the one that was just called. The question has to be called before it can be voted on. So that's why I'm calling the question. If we weren't able to ask the same motion, then we could never move on.
All right. A couple points there. The first is generally a point of order is if you disagree with the ruling of the chair. Secondly, if we do run into a place where there is no one else on the speaking list, we will automatically move to the question by me saying so. So you don't need to worry about that in the future. However, we do now have a motion and a second. So I think we should probably proceed with that. If you're voting by proxy, you will have until 6:29 to submit your proxies. Until 6:27, those who are in favor of ending debate, please raise your hand. And Sahil, there is no debate on a motion of calling the question. It generally is considered to be, if somebody is trying to end debate, people saying why there is merit to not ending debate usually ends up them just continuing to debate the question, which is why it's not usually done that way. Right, you have 15 more seconds. If you are voting yes, you are voting in favor of ending debate on this question. And we will immediately proceed to a vote without further debate. Five more seconds. I am noting 25 in favor. All those in favor, you can lower your hand. Those opposed to ending debate, you can now raise your hand. And we will continue voting until 45 seconds after 6:28. You have 15 seconds left in voting. If you're raising your hand now, you're voting against ending debate. Five more seconds. Noting 16 opposed. We are not yet at 6:29, so I will allow that time to expire. And then Mike, when you are ready, please tell me what the votes by proxy are.
Sure, give me 20 more seconds to.
Excellent. And if anybody would like their abstention noted, you are free to mention that in chat. However, just please note that it doesn't mean too much in this context.
Okay, just for the minutes I'm taking, Matthew, how many were live in the meeting against?
We had 25 in favor, 16 against.
And any abstaining or no? Or
Oh
yeah, you're not counting, correct.
I'm no longer counting abstentions.
Sure.
Right.
Proxies, we had 3 in favor of ending and 12 against ending. So that
Very
brings
well.
us to 28 in favor and 28 against.
The motion fails. We will continue with debate. For information, the people I currently have on the speakers list are Nicholas, Cannon, Sahil, and Ben. If you do not hear your name there, I do not have you on the speakers list, and please feel free to raise your hand. Nicholas, you are recognized for 10 minutes.
Thank you very much, Matthew. I think what's important to consider today is that despite all the work we've done, we are not accurately representing the body that we are pretending that we may be. The General Assembly is a useful mechanism for debate, but it does not totally encompass student will. I think it is unfortunate, the approach that the executive have used to reach the decisions they have today. And while I think that we can technically patch our way to a useful set of bylaws, I am deeply worried that our decisions today will have an impact on our ability in the future to include students that we think are important to voice their concerns. Part of our change to the decision-making process will include aspects of the Not-for-Profit Corporations Act that may be against the will of the student body. I would bring up the sections that will prevent directors from holding office should they have been previously under certain cases of mental stress, if they have been certain forms of immigrant, and a number of other cases that are important for students to participate and have an active voice in our community. I think notably, one case here that I've seen come up in the past was a Tibetan woman who was the president of a university in Canada who would no longer, or sorry, president of the Student Association of a university in Canada, who would be ineligible to be the president of the Waterloo Undergraduate Student Association under the future bylaws presented. I think we're doing a disservice to those students that are unrepresented. I think we're doing a disservice to the separation of powers, to representation, and in general, to trying and create a system that works for all. While the bylaws, I know you've put a lot of effort into them, I'm worried that since we are spending so much time deconstructing and attempting to rebuild from scratch many aspects of WUSA, that we will not get to the state we have now. It's putting a lot of faith into the next executive, and that is faith that I may not have in the upcoming student body. I think I'll close today on that sort of notion, that there are a number of issues with the bylaws presented. There may be workarounds, but we are setting ourselves up for failure where we did not need to in the past. Anyways, I will move to the next person on the speaking list and hope that you consider my words today and consider the ramifications of our decisions.
Thank you, Nicholas. Abhiraj, Evan, Catherine, Russ, I have you down. You can lower your hands. The next on the speaking list is Kanan.
Sorry, there's a POI in the chat just asking which motions require 2/3 majority that I don't feel confident in answering in chat.
Thank you very much. Not all motions require a 2/3 majority. Most motions require just a half majority. The 2/3 majority is generally reserved for a lot of procedural motions, whether you're ending debate, whether you are overriding, a previous decision on the agenda. It's a very difficult thing to go through and talk about everything. I think there's about 80 different types of motions in here, some of them 2/3, some of them 1/2. But I will try to mention the thresholds as I go through. Thank you, Cameron, for posting a link. I will note that I don't think the most recent version or even the 11th version is out. The threshold should be the same, but ultimately I will be relying on what I have here in front of me. All right. We have another point of information from Laura on what are considered special motions. I don't know if special motions are something that I have, I think, is an actual classification, though I might be wrong. I have privileged motions, but
Sorry.
Sorry, yes?
It's just the language that I use to refer to the groups of
Thank you.
motions that are required 2/3 motion majority.
Thank you. And then Jay, does the approval of the bylaw change require 2/3? I am going to ask one of the current directors who probably is more familiar with Anka than I am to give a quick yes or no answer.
I believe so. Because it has changed, we're making changes to how people, like the elected representation, the change size of the board. So I believe that does require 2/3 majority.
Thank you. And William, oh, Ben.
Sorry, Matthew. Is that with respect to the question to the threshold required to approve the new bylaws? Okay, yes. I can find it in the existing bylaws and support you in the ruling.
Yes, please.
Ben, I just did that.
It's not a ruling right now. It's just a question for information. We're going with 2/3 because I believe Ken cited something under the ONCA, which might even supersede your bylaws, your current bylaws. But we shall see. If it comes up, hopefully, hopefully we are either above 2/3 or below 1/2, but we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. William, a simple majority means strictly greater than 50%. Yes, so if you add up all the yeses and all the nos and divide the yeses by that number, if it is greater than 0.5, strictly greater than 0.5, that is what passage looks like. All right, we are moving on. Cannon, it is your speaking turn. You were recognized for 10 minutes. And before you begin, Edward, Nicholas, you have been added to the speaking list. You can lower.
I won't need 10 minutes. I'll try and keep this short and sweet. I'll start by kind of going through Nicholas's comments. I wasn't able to hear the entire thing because I lost connection in between, but I believe some of their comments were about how the new bylaws have to follow the Non-for-Profit Corporation Act or the new one, which I'm like, even if we don't have the new bylaws, we still need to follow the law. So even in we would still have to change our old bylaws to follow those new laws. So that means that doesn't really kind of come into decision about whether the new bylaws are good or not. The second thing I was going to kind of comment back was a comment made by Abhiraj about staff member voting. Yes, this was also something that I did bring up at board as just so like it's on the radar of board that people might have issues with that. In that meeting, board decided that there's not a lot we can do about it, so we can't make changes to who can vote or not in general. Like so quickly on the GM has that power to do that. And the last thing I was going to comment about the general student involvement in this process, I do agree personally that we didn't have a lot of general input. Yes, there were a lot of articles that were kind of sent out. There was a lot of articles written by president, and in general, we did send out agendas and stuff. But I do feel like there was a lack of at-large student involvement in this process. One thing I would mention is like if we had done something similar to how we advertised this GM, which was like really well advertised. So kudos to our marketing department for that. One of the most well advertised GMs I've seen in the last few years for WUSA. Maybe we would have gotten more student input into things. Yes, we had bodies like council and like board kind of lead this process, but at the same time, I think we were somewhat missing, as I like to call the little man, or people who are not on those bodies directly and are not involved in the day-to-day working of WUSA. Technically, I don't get to vote at this meeting because I graduated last term and I'm only here in my role as a director and a counselor, so I will not be voting on this, but these are just certain comments that I would like to make. In general, yes, there are good things in the new bylaws. There might be things I'm not super in favor of, but they are kind of part and parcel of the bylaws. So I would kind of let everyone else decide how they would, but those are just like some ramblings of someone who's no longer going to be a member. I'm done anyways, so we're good.
Excellent. We have a point of personal privilege from Alora. Please state your point.
Hello, I'm just recognizing that it's already 6:40 and I know that it was stated at the beginning that this meeting would be chopped off at 7. The point of personal privilege, I have two. The first one is that if students are already graduated and they won't be voting on this motion, I'm wondering why we're taking up valuable speaking time for those students. I know there's lots of input and I respect that. It's great to have their wisdom and their insight. However, with a limited 2-hour window and lots of things that we're not even through, what is the chair's opinion on that?
I do. Firstly, that's generally not what we use a point of personal privilege for. Generally, that's if there's something preventing you from being able to participate.
Yes, and in this instance, it's preventing me from being able to participate by speaking on the next motion because we have more people speaking to the first motion. That's my context.
I don't find that concern well-founded. If there is, and hear me out here, if that is a point of concern for you, then please do feel free to, you have expended both of your speaking turns. So if there is someone else you can ask to move a motion to extend the end point of the meeting, then you are free to do so and debate will unfold that way. And that is how we will be able to arbitrate that. I do not, I actually will, in one instance though, ask the president to weigh in here. By what authority are your directors speaking, or do they have speaking rights explicitly under some authority in this meeting?
Yes, so when the board met to approve the agenda for this meeting, it was discussed and the board decided that those members of student governance, so counselors and directors whose terms of office had been extended, would be given speaking rights, but not voting rights.
And I'm taking that extends from the fact that through the extension of the governing year, those privileges are considered to continue.
That's correct. That was the motivation for that decision by the board.
All right, thank you. Ben, I will ask if the meeting does end at 7, that when you have your speaking turn, and if you do not have another motion, if you could please bring up a motion to extend. That's just my suggestion to you. You're under no obligation to follow that. All right. Sahil, you are next on the speaking list. Oh, wait, sorry. Cannon, you had a point.
Privilege. I'll withdraw just to save time, but I'm just gonna, I'll just withdraw.
Thank you. Sahil, you are recognized for 10 minutes.
I have a couple of questions. One is, have we considered a position of a speaker to run meetings, in the general meetings and the election? And my second question is, what happens if this motion fails? Is there a plan to have an election and continue with the old governance structure, or is there something else planned? And finally, I would like to move a motion to extend this meeting until 8 p.m. And I would ask that we limit off-topic discussion because it is taking us off the path of this important discussion of the bylaws.
Before I proceed, I will ask, is there a seconder for extending the meeting to 8 p.m.? I see Alora as a seconder. I will hold on that for one moment, if you folks will allow me, and I will pose those two previous questions to Ben, using the remainder of Sahil's time. The appointment of a speaker to oversee the transition was my understanding of the first question. And second, what happens should this motion fail and the bylaws not be approved? When do elections occur? Those are the questions you've been asked. Thank you.
Sorry.
Thanks. Sahil, I think I understood your first question was about a speaker for this meeting specifically, correct?
No, in general, an elected speaker that is in charge of the meetings while they're the speaker, so that the president is not running the general meetings, as well as any elections that might happen.
So in this particular instance, the general meeting did vote earlier to install Matthew Garretts as the temporary chair. In general, though, it's the responsibility of the president, both in the old bylaws and in the new bylaws, to preside or to chair or to be the speaker, however you want to call it, general meetings. And typically students' council as well, though there is sort of a separate office in the bylaws for the speaker of council, which can be can be any student, in fact. In the new model, it's anticipated that this will continue, that the president will be sort of the chair of the board, though this can be delegated if needed. So in a sense, yes, the speaker is elected, but it's a responsibility vested with the president. For the second question, so if these bylaws are not confirmed by this vote, then we will be compelled to hold an election before the 1st of September, in line with the temporary amending bylaw, which was approved at the special general meeting of the 1st of February this year. So I'd say it would be it would require some adaptation from the org to be able to do that, but certainly our staff have done it before and they can do it again.
Thank you. Ben, there was one element in the speaker's question that I don't think you addressed, which is election administration and who administers elections. Is that administered by the president?
Oh, so thank you, Matthew, for reminding me. Currently, we have a chief returning officer who is a student hired annually. It's outlined in the elections and referenda procedure, which you can find on the website. There's sort of a person who is committing not to run, who oversees the elections and referenda committee, which is sort of the independent or arm's length body, which administers elections to executive elections and council elections currently. In the new model, it will be for board elections. And that body hears sort of appeals and allegations and things like that. Yeah, and that's outlined in elections and referenda procedure.
Thank you, Ben. We are now moving on to a motion to extend to 8 p.m. Edward, Angela, Vincent, you can lower your hands. You've been preserved on the speaking list for the main motion. The mover for the extension was Sahil. The seconder was Alora. I am just checking right now if that is a debatable motion or not. If anybody knows that answer off the absolute top of their head, do feel free to let me know. It's the time to which to adjourn. Nope. Debates to limit extensive duration of a meeting. Debatable? Yes, it is debatable. Do we have anybody who wishes to debate on the motion? Nicholas, I have you. You're recognized for up to 10 minutes on this motion.
Can I confirm this doesn't eat into my speaking time on the previous motion?
It does not.
Thank you. Well, I personally would like to see this meeting end at 7 p.m. I also think it's an important aspect to fully and completely debate the motion and all the motions presented. So while I find it distasteful, I think by principle, it is important that we should extend this meeting.
Excellent. I wish to apologize, Laura. You should have been given the first opportunity to speak. That was an oversight on my part, but you are recognized now. Or, sorry, you were seconded. First
Yeah,
to be
go
offered. I don't think he has raised his hand, so you are free to speak.
Thank you so much. No worries. I would like to speak to the fact, also seconding Nicholas, that yes, whereas it's important to keep to the scheduled allotted time because people expect certain things and they have places to be, we want to make sure that we get through everything on the agenda. I know last meeting we extended by an hour and we still hadn't finished discussion after a 4-hour meeting on some of topics related to these two. So while we are moving right now to extend the time to 8 p.m., I'd just like it to be considered in future meetings that if we don't get through all of these or we lose quorum or something happens, that WUSA would consider extending meeting times based on the knowledge of how long it takes us to talk about these things and have a good democratic debate. I know I have moved several motions, and that is purely out of concern that we won't get to item number 5. I know item number 4 I would love to speak on, but I have restrained myself this far because we all have different orders of priority, but I really feel that the timing was not great on this, so I would like everyone to vote to extend this to 8 p.m. Thank you so much.
Evan, you're recognized. Someone unmute Evan.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, pretty short. I think we should be respectful of everybody's time. A lot of people have places to be, and I have experience of being in a budget meeting recently, which was extended until like 11:59 p.m. and we were there till 11:30, and everyone was very hungry and upset. So I'd like to see something similar not happen here. Bad experience. I think we should respect people's time and probably not extend it. Thank you.
Vincent, you're recognized.
I'd just like to respond to something a lot said about in terms of how we schedule how much time to allot to meetings. If people...
Hey, friend, you're really quiet.
Can you hear me better now?
Yes, thank you.
Sorry, I just want to respond to what Alora was saying about how WUSA schedules how long to allocate for meetings. I think if we hadn't had people waste times on pointless motions to rearrange the agenda or repeatedly trying to call the question despite a motion to call the question already failing and trying to do so early in the debate, we probably would have been on the next motion by now if it weren't for some members wasting so much of our time.
I would like to remind members to be courteous to one another. Also, just as a reminder to everyone, we are currently not debating future practices, and I know this goes for multiple people in the previous conversation. This is just forward guidance. We are debating whether to extend debate. We're not debating anything about the length of future general meetings right now. Naman, I apologize. I do not know how to say your name.
That is fine. You did well enough. Yeah, I just wanted to say that some of us are not in Eastern time zone at the moment. We are in other time zones because of co-op, and some of us are also we have like exams and stuff. Like midterms have started in some courses. I have a midterm due tonight, and I think because of recognizing that we are all students and we have student things to do, it is important to stick to schedules. And yeah, I would like to see the schedule stuck to, because I would like to discuss motion number 5. It's just if the meeting is extended, I will not be able to discuss it because I will have to leave for my midterm.
I would like
Matthew,
to
there's
just
a point of order in the there's a point of privilege.
we will take point of privilege. Jay, wait a second. Sorry, we have a point of order, Stephanie.
Sorry, no, I withdrew. It's Alora with the point of privilege.
Thank you. Alora, point of privilege.
Hello, I would just like to ask the member who indicated that there were frivolous comments made earlier in the meeting. I believe everyone who made points of privilege and information explained themselves. I would like to give that member a chance to retract their statement, because this is a democracy, nothing is useless. It may seem long-winded, but that's how we have democracy here.
I will, if that person wishes to join the speaking list again, they are free to, or they are free not to, but we will continue onwards. I have Sonia. Sonia?
Yeah, Sonia, thank you. So I forget whose name it was, the last person that spoke, and while I do agree that it's important to stick to people's schedules, as during COVID, when you had to submit assignments, it was always done in an Eastern time zone, so we do have to respect that as well, that we are joining this meeting as if we are in Waterloo. I also do agree with Alora's points that we should be allowing everybody to speak on all motions. I don't think that any sort of conversation is frivolous or irrelevant. I think that we should be speaking on everything, and I think it's good to give everybody an opportunity in order to speak. Thank you.
Yes, I would like to now just take a moment to mention and clarify for people proactively that if we do not extend the meeting will terminate. We will not get to either motion. This is not time allocated specifically for motion 4. It is time allocated for the entire meeting. Naman, I have you next. We'll wait another 10 seconds. All right, Naman, I'm going to lower your hand if you wish to be added to the speaking list
I'm
again.
so sorry. I did not hear that. It was my turn.
Sorry.
Sorry. Yeah, I just wanted to respond to the thing where, you know, I get that we're supposed to all be in the Eastern time zone. That is partially why I need to do my midterm at such an inconvenient time. Even if you are in the Eastern time zone, you can still have things due at 11:59 p.m. and you can still have midterms that are 4 hours long and due at 11:59 p.m. So there is definitely an argument, I think, to be made that by extending the meeting this late into the night, you are stifling the voices of the students who have due dates. And, you know, if we're all for democracy, I think we should all be for a transparent schedule, which accurately lets us know when a meeting will end so that we can plan our daily tasks accordingly and still contribute our voice. Yeah.
Nicholas.
Hello. I think I'd like to speak in support of Naiman's position earlier. I'd also address again the issue with the Eastern time zone. As an individual who's had to set due dates for students, and while we use the Eastern time zone as a standard, we often will include many hours in which a assignment during this period, as we're learning how to operate online, for students to be able to complete with a reasonable time frame. So again, to the specifics that Naiman has brought up, we are dealing with a situation here where students were told this meeting would take 2 hours, and it is looking to be extended substantially beyond that without consideration for active participation and adequate attendance from the entirety of the student population. So again, extending a debate may be important, but it's also important to consider that as debate gets longer, the voices that will be present will reflect less and less those who originally felt it was important to attend the meeting today.
A point of order, Matthew.
I'm here, a point of order from Benjamin Easton.
I would appeal to the chair to consider postponing the adjournment of this meeting till at least a time after we've considered this specific question.
I don't think that's in order, but if we begin voting, then I believe that that should not be an issue. Laura, do you have a point of order?
Yes, just a point of order. The recent clarification, we already have a motion on the table, but point of information, if halfway through the vote 7 p.m. happens, what is to be done?
If the motion succeeds, then it is extended. We do not automatically terminate unless that is raised, and you cannot actually raise a point of order during voting. All right, I believe we have Sahil. We no longer have.
I'd like to move to the vote, yeah.
There is no one else in the speaking list. We will move to the vote. Voting opens. Please, we will go until until 30 seconds after 7. Sorry, not 30 seconds after 7. We'll go until 7:01. Please raise your hand if you are in favor of extending the meeting. The motion that we are currently debating is to extend the end time of the meeting until 8 p.m. How do we vote? You raise your hand to vote, Sahil. Currently, if you raise your hand before 7:01, you are voting in favor of extending the meeting. If you would like to vote against extending the meeting, please wait until 7:01, in which I'll open voting in that round. Those holding a proxy, we will give you until 7:02 to deliver your proxy votes to Mike Semeta. More seconds. I'm seeing 39 people in favor of extension. You can now lower your hands. For the next minute, so until 15 seconds after 7:02, if you raise your hand, you will be voting against extending the meeting. I plug in my laptop in a meeting. Again, raise your hand in the next 5 to 10 seconds if you are against extending the meeting to 8 p.m. That is the motion we are currently debating. I'm seeing 9 against. Like Semeta, and when you're ready, please feel free to give me the results that you have. All right.
I'm not fully counted, but I can tell you that we have 19 for extending and 4 against so far. So if that puts us over some tilting edge, then
It does not. I will wait until
okay.
you feel you have fully counted. This was a body that had a definite cutoff. If we reached 15,000 yays, then I would probably be pretty confident. But I don't think we are at that point.
Okay, I have 22 proxies for and 4 against.
Excellent. I declare the motion passed. We have extended the ending time to 8 o'clock. We are back to the main motion. Ben, you are next on the speaking order. This is your second speaking turn.
Thanks, Matthew. And I'll say thank you to the members gathered for extending the meeting for this very important item. I guess I think a lot of the points I've said have already been touched on by others, though I admit to being a bit discombobulated after that minor panic. But I think so. Some of the concerns that were raised were about sort of the degree of involvement of the average student in this process and how we can consider it to be legitimate. I think my perspective as somebody who admittedly is like quite involved in student government is that the like particular circumstances and like facts about the system are like not clear to those who are not a part of it, and in that way, like those who are like members of council and directors and executives and those who have been actively involved in these roles are often best placed to speak to like the issues that they experience. And I guess I would concur with Vincent's remarks that, you know, there are of course things that we can point to as issues in the new model. There is no such thing as a perfect governance system, but the changes that are proposed by this set of bylaws put us in a much better place to address these issues in the long run and to set us up for, you know, serving the interest of students. I believe it was Abhiraj who mentioned sort of the conflict of people acting in the organization's best interest rather than the best interest of the membership. And this brings up sort of an interesting point about sort of the in the existing model that we have of students' council and a board of directors, there's this idea of splitting the representative duty and the so-called fiduciary duty, which is the best interest of the organization, where the board acts for the corporation and the budget and the legal and the HR and the risk and all this stuff, ONCA compliance with provincial legislation, stuff that Nicholas mentioned earlier. Whereas council is sort of this representative body that specifically deals with the interests of students, their positions on political issues, the budget power being shared. What I will say is that the idea of splitting the fiduciary and the representative functions, organizations like how WUSA works presently are the anomaly in the nonprofit sector more broadly. Most organizations of our scope and size have a single board, which, of course, student unions perhaps are the exception, but it is not uncommon to have a board which is both responsible for the best interests of the organization and for representing the interests of the members. And in fact, it's a good thing to have those combined, I would argue. We can think of, for example, like a municipal council, which, you know, is the board of directors for the corporation of the city or the town, but also representative of constituents. And I think simplifying the governance structure really is like the critical issue that this governance review hopes to solve. Then to Nicholas's point about some of the requirements of the provincial legislation and the example of somebody who would have been prevented from participating, I don't know specifically. I'm not a lawyer, clearly. I don't know the specifics of eligibility, but what I will say is that regardless of how we feel about it, we have to comply with the law. And it's sort of worked out that we're doing this large organizational change at the time where we need to start complying with this new legislation, which only came into force last fall. Then to a point about sort of excluding students by reducing the size of the board, I'm not sure that I'm convinced by this because of the fact that being involved in WUSA is not limited to being on council or on board or on the new board or being an elected student. A lot of the work that this organization does relies on part-time student staff who work in areas like the services or could support in like advocacy projects specifically, like those who worked as like associate vice presidents. And there's still plenty of opportunity in the new model for students to become involved in sort of less intensive ways than being on the board. And the final point I'll make about sort of questions about how a smaller body could be as effective as the larger body that we do have. I think that, I mean, it's been alluded to in this meeting, our value as a democratic organization. And I think if we really believe in that, then it means that we want to have a contest of ideas. And by reducing the number of elected seats available, it forces there to be more competition, which would hopefully, thinking in terms of a system, should tend to better, like more competitive races, better outcomes, more engagement from the student body, all of these things that we all want to accomplish. So that I believe is all that I had to say. So evidently I'm in favor of the motion.
All right, thank you for the point of information, and thank you, Catherine, for being on top of it. The current speaking list in order: Abhiraj, Evan, Catherine, Russ, Nicholas, Edward, Angela, Vincent, and now Stephanie Mo. I will also mention for anybody who is looking to make a motion to call the question, I'm not saying you should, but if you do, please note that it needs to be the first thing you say in your speaking turn. You can't just give a speech, then call the question. One of those weird peculiarities in Robert's rules, just letting you know so you don't accidentally have been waiting for 45 minutes to call the question and have to fail on a technicality. All right. I will also add before we move on to Abhiraj, Sonia, you are also on the speaking list. You can lower your hand. All right, Abhiraj, you're recognized for up to 10 minutes.
Thank you, Matthew. So first, just to clarify, can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Great, thank you. So yeah, in the discussion so far, some of my concerns have been addressed. However, for the most part, I would say my concerns remain. I will not be reiterating them for the sake of time. However, the biggest concern which I had was, and which still remains, is the first one I made, which was that I do not believe students were properly educated and engaged about these changes. And while I have a lot of respect and immense confidence in the WUSA executive team, WUSA council, and the WUSA governing structure as a whole, the WUSA governance as a whole right now, I do believe this is a very major change where inadequate student, which should not be made with inadequate student input. With that in mind, I would like to propose an amendment, which I will be amendment to the motion, which I will be putting in the chat. Just one moment. Sorry, I should have that ready. Yeah. So just a precursor to this, I understand that this has been addressed before. So I understand that a referendum is not as binding to society as a GM, and that we don't have enough time to that if we don't pass this today, like I think Ben said that we will need to go to the old governance structure. So I have kept those two things in mind while proposing this amendment. So it's in the chat now. And it is, be it resolved that the old the current governance structure continues for the governing year 22-23. Be it further resolved that these bylaw changes are voted on by a referendum with sufficient time for a yes and no committee to inform and engage students. Be it further resolved that the results of this referendum is then ratified by a general meeting. Thank you.
Before I recognize your motion and look for a seconder, I'm just going to ask if it would be amenable to you that if your motion passes, that it also strike out the requisite pieces of the current motion such that the motion does not both confirm and conditionally confirm the thing. Just know it, just understanding that that is what you want.
Right, sorry, I should have clarified that. Yeah.
That is all right. I will now look for a seconder. I believe I have one in Nicholas, unless you wish to correct me.
No, I think that this is a motion that
just take your second, and we will open a speaking list.
Sorry,
right.
should not the mover and seconder have speaking first?
They do, but I do believe that Abhiraj actually gets to speak to it first, if he so chooses. He has already, but he does technically get to again, should he choose.
Yeah, I think I've mostly said what my points were regarding this amendment, and yeah, overall, my concern, as I mentioned, is just that I believe this is a major change, and the student body's opinion, student body's educated opinion should be taken on this, which is why I believe we should have this amendment. And the thing is, I feel that not taking the student body's opinion and making them feel excluded just hurts WUSA by feeding into the already growing apathy and antipathy towards the organization. Thank you.
Thank you, Abhiraj. Thank you for your patience, Nicholas. You are next on the speaking list.
No worries. I think Abhiraj has struck on something that would rectify many of my worries about the democratic nature of this process. I feel that while the general meetings are an approach to passing aspects of WUSA governance, a referendum would fully involve the student body and would entirely remove any justification to ignore the commentary of our executive due to a lack of input. I think Aberaj's compromise is one that we should all get behind. And while it may delay the work that the executive have put in, I feel it does justice to their care, to their caution, and to all of us combined. I think this is a wonderful compromise, and I applaud Aberaj for the creativity.
The speaking list is currently Vincent, Catherine, Jay, Matthew, and then Edward. Stephanie, if you want to be added, please lower your hand and re-raise your hand. Your hand has been up since the last question. All right, we will move on to Vincent.
With all due respect to Aberaj and Nick, I don't think a referendum is appropriate for this. Referendums are great for, simple issues, but, what kind of governance structure should WUSA have is such a complex technical issue that there's no way you could have meaningful yes, no campaigns that the average student will follow and understand and be able to make an informed decision. I mean, for other instances of complicated referendums, look at things like Brexit, which I don't think went well. There's a reason we have a representative democracy. We appoint people to study the issues very, very closely and make an informed decision, because not every student has the time to spend dozens and dozens of hours poring over dense legalese to decide what they think about the bylaws like counselors have done. I mean, I think part of the issue with our current governance system is, frankly, there aren't enough students who even want to do that kind of work for us to, have the kind of, I guess, democratic oversight and that we would want. And I think that's, I think a lot of students here are just more focused on co-op than student governance, which honestly, fair enough. Yeah, it really doesn't make sense to have such a complex issue go to a referendum. It'll probably be the lowest turnout referendum that has ever happened, because I don't think there's a significant portion of students that care about this, unfortunately, that will spend the time to research into both sides and then will bother to vote. It's just not going to happen. A referendum here serves no purpose other than to delay. And so I would encourage the Assembly to vote against this amendment.
Thank you, Vincent. Catherine?
Hello. I suppose I would respectfully also encourage the Assembly to vote against this amendment. I really do understand where the motion is coming from. However, I think that it's important to remember that a referendum doesn't fix things. A referendum in this case does not, fix a lot of the concerns that we're hearing from members here today. Students aren't required to vote in a referendum. Students are encouraged to vote in a referendum, and every student who would be eligible to vote in a referendum, it was also eligible and invited to be here today and to be at every previous GM that we've held over the last few months. There have been several discussions at GMs regarding these bylaws and governance changes for which students were given notice via email twice, as well as invited to read through articles written by the president to try and explain the governance changes in plain language. Students were invited to attend council to learn about the bylaws or to speak to any concerns. and that's been, you know, a meeting every month, pretty much, talking about these bylaws. I really do understand that the hope is that we could have more students directly engaged with the process, but, you know, seeing as we've made what I believe is every reasonable effort to engage students with the process, to provide students with opportunities to ask questions and to understand the changes that are being made, I think that it's reasonable to say that this general meeting is, for all intents and purposes, equivalent to the vote at this general meeting is, for all intents and purposes, equivalent to a referendum vote in terms of the eligibility of every single at-large student to cast their ballot, I guess, and make their preferences heard. And, you know, seeing as I really strongly believe in the importance of a lot of the changes that will come through with this governance change, with the new bylaws, I think that it'd be doing a huge disservice to our student population to delay the implementation of these bylaws any more than it has to be. So yes, I would respectfully encourage the Assembly to vote against this amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, Catherine. Jay?
Should be good now.
You should be able to unmute yourself now.
Hey, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. As a counselor myself, I would recommend the Assembly vote yes to this motion. This thing is not that complicated. There's a board in the SLC to compare the differences between two governing models. Whoever makes this is genius. It is very easy to understand the pros and cons between the two governing models, and I believe that students can make a choice based on that information. Students not necessarily need to understand every single line of the bylaw. That is very long, very complicated. However, students can easily understand the benefits or the disadvantages of each governing models. And I believe that a referendum here can be useful to make such decision. And for this assembly, is in the middle of a week. It's Wednesday, 5 p.m. I personally believe it's not the best time for hold a meeting this time. Maybe that's why some students choose not to come to this meeting to vote. And if we hold a referendum, students can maybe actively know what's going on here and make their choice. So that's why I recommend the Assembly vote yes to this amendment.
Thank you. Mike, is your question, do you have a procedural point, or are you going to be speaking substantially?
Actually, disregard. I will withdraw.
Excellent. All right, Matthew.
Thank you very much. I just want to speak against this amendment. I think that there's a number of reasons why it doesn't make sense, not least of which is the sort of laundry list that Vincent brought forward, that bylaws are very complex, governance is very complex, and it is also very boring. You know, these bylaws, all this information, this stuff has been emailed to students several times, been advertised. Like, you know, there's only so many ways to get that information out there. And I don't feel that, you know, forcing this question upon students through a referendum is what makes sense. Students are able to, you know, trust their representatives at council and other bodies, the board, to act in their best interest. The board is actually there to act on behalf of the membership in taking care of the corporation. That's their purpose under the law. And all of that is because, you know, there are really complex questions like this one that requires many, many pages of bylaws to govern an organization and to pour over the Not-for-Profit Corporations Act and the Corporations Act and, you know, our policies and procedures and how we do things. It's just something that doesn't make sense for students. Students are supposed to be able to count on the representatives to go through all these things for them and make that decision. And I think that if, you know, at the first sight of something that's a little bit difficult to call, we just turn it over to students, that's doing an incredible disservice to them. The other thing I want to bring up is that we spoke with the lawyers actually about this, about the idea of, okay, approving the bylaws to a referendum. And under Ontario law, the referendum, and under our current bylaws, the referendum is nowhere near as powerful as the GM. The GM is the final deciding body. A referendum actually cannot even approve bylaws whatsoever. It has to get passed back to the GM, as noted somewhat in the motion. But at that GM, you know, they could strike it, they could rewrite it, they could completely change things. They can amend the bylaws on the floor that students get a referendum on a different set of bylaws. The general meeting is where these decisions are made under Ontario law. That's what governs us. That's what the system that we live in, and we're constrained by that. So I really think that this is I can see the positive intent behind it, but I think all things considered, it's a misguided direction to take this this process.
Sorry, what's going on in the chat here? Excellent. All right, I have Edward.
Hi, can you hear me?
His team's works. Excellent. Welcome, Edward.
Hi. I would like to speak against this amendment because although I do appreciate the sentiment behind it, and I agree that it in theory sounds like a better way of getting direct student input on this, I think in practice, referendum are a much more simplistic view that kind of narrows the question down in ways that doesn't really help your average student or help WUSA succeed in helping students back. The long and short of it is that governance is complicated and messy, and this governance model has been worked on by, I would say, dozens upon dozens of people who know the ins and outs of this governance structure, have lived within it for several years, know the pain points, along with new voices from people on council and from focus groups and from the constituent societies that we've drawn in through the process to hear what their problem issues are with the way organization is currently running. And I think, frankly, the results of this referendum will come out to be the same thing, that they want this governance change so that WUSA can do better things for the students. I think with the way Students' Council has been going, Students' Council has been moving towards this governance change for the last 8 months, I would say at least 8 months. And Students' Council is formed up of elected representatives who your average student has already voted in to act on their behalf and make decisions on behalf of what they think will be best for themselves and for students on the whole. So Students' Council, which represents the will of students as is, has already been pushing for governance review, and this is the current bylaw they've already approved. I think bringing it to a referendum is redundant, and although it may sound nice, we're really running on fumes as an organization, and I don't think another year will really be sustainable or even likely to cause things to keep working. I think we're on our last legs here without a governance change.
All right, thank you, Edward. For everyone's information, before I proceed to the next speaker, the speakers list is Alora, Angela, Abhiraj, Nicholas, Ray, Cannon, Amelia, Edward, Michael. Or strike that, Mike, you're no longer on the speaking list. Alora, please proceed with.
Thank you. I move to call the question.
Yes, all right. Can we see a seconder? Ben is seconded. We have a valid motion. We will tell proxy holders you have until 7:31 to enter your votes. Those in favor, please raise your hand until 7:28. For those in favor of ending debate on this referendum, piece. Just to make sure, this is ending debate. Voting in favor does not say you are in favor of a referendum or against a referendum. It just says that we should move to voting on that question. And in the chat, what do we have? Withdraw. And Angela withdraws. Thank you. Five seconds left. In favor of ending debate, I have 28 individuals. please lower your hands now until 7:31. Please raise your hands if you are against ending debate on this question. Again, if this passes, then we immediately move to a vote on this referendum order with no further debate. You raise your hand, you wish debate to continue, you have 20 seconds. I am seeing 7 individuals against. We will wait for Mike. Well, I'm seeing 8 against. We will wait for Mike to complete his counting of the proxy votes. Please just hold while that occurs. I don't know if you guys can react, considering that the chat has been turned off, but I think everybody should be very grateful for our meeting secretary, given that he has been counting at a rather furious pace throughout this, and it is very essential to how this meeting structure goes. So thank you very much, Mike.
Sure. Thank you so much, Matthew. I have 10 for and 1 against.
All right, I'm going to need to do some math very quickly. I apologize. I have 38 in favor, 9 against. Actually, that succeeds. We are going to move immediately to voting on the referendum language. So the vote is opening now.
There's a point of order.
We have a point of order. I will rescind my opening of that. Yes, Cannon, your point of order.
I believe my vote over email was not counted in the correct manner.
Sorry, Canon is correct. Let me modify my count, sorry. We have 4 against instead of that 1. I mistallied him.
And how many for on your end? Mike?
So 10 for and 4 against.
Okay. More math. Bear with me. That is 76% voting in favor. The motion still passes. We are going to enter into voting. Apologies to those on the speakers list. You have been removed from the speakers list. All right, how we will do this, because this is a larger vote, we will give people a little more time. I recognize that I have been pushing the proxy vote tallying pretty quickly, so get your stuff in by 7:37 on this particular motion, please. We will, because I believe this is probably a pretty significant vote, we will also take abstentions on this one explicitly. I mean, I guess there's no actual reason to, but I will, just to kill the time. All right. Those in favor, please raise your hand before 7:34 or 7:35. If you are voting in favor, you are taking Abhiraj's language that asks for a referendum, which the lawyers have mentioned is non-binding, and essentially for this issue to be pushed to a future meeting where it will be discussed again anew. This will also, in effect, strike the first be it resolved, or both of the be it resolved statements. Because presumably the scheduling of the meeting would still occur under the old bylaws. So vote in favor if that is your the direction you wish to take. This is a 50%. It is just a majority. It is a majority vote. So you need 50% plus 1. You know, anything above is 0.5. A tie vote is a fail. Great. 5 seconds left. I'm counting 15 in favor. Great. All right, before 7:36:15, if you raise your hand, you are voting against the language that has been proposed by Abhiraj, and therefore you wish the motion to stay exactly as it is, as seen on the screen. It doesn't mean you approve of what is on the motion of the screen. It doesn't mean you're opposed. You would just prefer to vote on Abhiraj's question, not the one that is currently on the screen. Sorry, I got that reversed. If you're voting no, you prefer the one that is on the screen. That is what you want to vote on, not Abhiraj's language. I apologize for the confusion. And would you please post the motion here again? I apologize, that is not possible at this time. But if you scroll up, I believe that the language there is explicit. Be it resolved that the old governance structure continues for the governing year 2022 to 2023. Be it further resolved the bylaw changes are voted on by referendum with sufficient time for a yes and no committee to inform and engage students. Be it further resolved that the result of the referendum is then ratified by a general meeting. And I think we have elapsed the time for that. I'm seeing 24. You can now lower your hands. And since our time is almost expired anyway, is there anybody who would like to abstain, explicitly with your name mentioned in the minutes? Again, it's just if you want to be seen not taking a position, but it's not. All right, Sahil. Please note, you also can't abstain and vote for one of the yes or no options, just so you know. And we have hit 7:37. Sahil is the only person who wanted to be noted an abstention. Your proxy vote should now be in. We will again wait for the tally from Mike whenever he is ready.
Okay, the proxy count is 10 against, 4 in favor, and 3 abstaining.
All right, the motion failed. So I will just type the result in here. 19 in favor of motion, 134 against. You have the list of abstentions from that side, so I will also say Sahil abstains, would like to mention it. All right, we will proceed. The motion has failed. We are back to the main motion, which appears for you. We're back to the main speaking list, and I will give everyone a reminder of the speaking list this time. That is Evan, Catherine, Russ, Nicholas, Edward, Angela, Vincent, Stephanie Mo, and Sonia. Point of personal privilege before we begin, Alora.
Hello, I noticed there's only one abstention from Sahil, but the proxy, there should be more than one if the emails were counted.
Yes, those will be counted by, specifically by Mike. He has access to it, and he will also be doing the minutes. But I don't have access to who voted which way, but he does.
Do we have access to those numbers?
4 in favor, 10 against, in proxies, 15 in favor, 24 against in person.
3 abstain by proxy, Alora, if that's what you're asking.
Thank you.
No problem.
All right, Evan, you're recognized for up to 10 minutes.
Thank you. Just a minute. So it's of my opinion that WUSA is not most nonprofit organizations. I feel that it's bad enough that the fiduciary and advocacy responsibilities of WUSA's board and students council are being merged into a single party. The organizational structure, which is opposed by WUSA, neglects faculty-specific representation on WUSA. While WUSA's advocacy does not strictly focus on faculty-specific advocacy and opts to leave that to faculty societies, I'm sure everyone can agree here that it's absolutely essential that concerns, thoughts, and experiences from students across all faculties are represented within WUSA's ranks. And after persistent raising of these concerns to WUSA execs, the best they could muster is a loose affirmative action model, which fails to guarantee that each faculty will be well represented on the new WUSA board. There have been reasons cited, such as conflicts with the charter held with the university administration, but as evidenced by discussions in previous meetings, I have the impression that this has not been considered carefully enough, and moreover, that it's absolutely within the executive's power to determine a better interim solution with longer range plans rather than, meekly hoping that the next executive team figures it out. I should note that before being a counselor, I was a student and I attended all or most of the meetings about this topic that I could, and at each one I found that in response to most concerns, the WUSA exec repeatedly dodged specific questions and gave vague answers when interrogated about the specific roadblocks and issues and their proposed solutions. It's unfortunate to me that the current executives have seen it fit to sort of ram these changes through the door with appalling little consultation and explicit approval from the student body at large. I think that there are many good things in this set of bylaws, and that it ought to be workshopped, but more time ought to have been taken to arrange this. With all that said, I am still largely in support of this, and I think it should be voted for because, as has been cited by some of the other members of the Assembly who have had more longer-term experience with WUSA, it seems to be at sort of a breaking point right now. And so while I'm a little disappointed in the current executive, and while I wish more time had been spent on this, I do think that now is still the time to act, and that, I hope that the current executive can put in place more concrete plans to, in the near future, look after revising these shortcomings in the current bylaws.
Thank you. Catherine will be next, but before we begin, I will also remind people that we are slated to end at 8 o'clock. After 8 o'clock, anybody could bring to my attention that we are no longer validly in order and the meeting would end. All right, Catherine.
Thanks. Sorry, my brain just completely blanked. Is the current point of personal privilege in the chat, has that been addressed?
It is not current. It has been addressed.
Okay, thank you. So I am speaking in favor of the motion. I really want to emphasize as much as I possibly can how important it is that these bylaws are passed and that they're passed as soon as we can, which is today, I suppose, for the governing year that would begin on September 1st. I've been involved with WUSA since my 1B term here, and I've been in this executive position since the beginning of last May. And after, being completely immersed in this system and learning the ins and outs of it, both as an executive as well as a faculty counselor previously on council, I really do believe in the changes that this bylaw embodies, especially when it comes to these, like the fundamental changes of combining the responsibilities of council and board into a singular representative body. I also really believe in the election system that we've sort of built here. When with the previous member referred to it as the affirmative action model, we've also been referring to it as the faculty guarantee model because it really does, in my opinion, give us the best of both worlds in terms of having something that's representative and democratic, as well as doing our best to guarantee that we can incorporate and include as many voices from as many faculties as we can. So I hope that that's something that we're comfortable sort of putting to rest. It's been brought forward many times and discussed, and eventually it was the choice that students in general agreed what we wanted to move forward with. Although that's not to say that in future, should students decide that it's no longer sufficiently representing their needs, it can be revisited. It's not core to the proposal that's on the floor, though. The current model is not sustainable. It made a lot more sense when we were a very small organization. It made a lot more sense when the roles of executives and the way that they were intertwined with operations made sense for the scale of the organization and the scale of the student body, but it's just not anymore. It's not a system that allows elected student leaders, and I'm not just talking about myself, I'm talking about, counselors and directors and whatnot, to appropriately exercise their expertise in representing students. The new set of bylaws is positioned to do that properly. I'm not speaking very well because the stakes do feel quite high. Sorry, yeah.
I'm going to interrupt you a second. We have a point of personal privilege, Sonia.
Yeah, thanks. I'm worried that some of us won't have our voices heard on agenda item number 5 if quorum is lost after number 4 is passed. So I'm raising this point now as the last motion to extend time took more than 10 minutes to discuss. So I propose a motion that if quorum is lost before we vote on agenda item number 5, that another general meeting be called within a month, and then this agenda item be added directly after the approval of the agenda of this next WUSA meeting and before any other agenda items that WUSA or any members may oppose.
I apologize, you cannot make a motion out of a point. However, I would invite Sonia to, or not, sorry, I would invite Catherine, if she is so willing, to make such a motion at the end of her speech, which I interrupted. Before I get there though, Edward, would you like to, Edward has withdrawn his point of order. Please continue, Catherine.
Alora, if you can type what you were hoping for in the chat, I'll consider it. Yeah, sorry, I'm sort of all over the place because the stakes do feel quite high here. Knowing the time that I've spent working full-time in the organization, I just can't stress how important it is that we pass these bylaws today, so that, starting in September 1st, we can have an organization that just runs more smoothly, is better positioned to serve the student body. No system is perfect, but this is a really, really big step towards something that works so much better than what we have right now. I don't see anything in the chat right now, so unfortunately I don't have time to motion.
Catherine, may I recommend that you simply raise a motion to extend time for debate to 9 p.m. I will suggest that.
Would you? I'll motion to extend to 8:30.
We have a motion to extend to 8:30. Do we have a seconder? Stephanie Yemo seconds. We are now, Laura, I'm sorry, you can't pose a motion. You have exhausted both of your speaking turns. We need to take motions from people in order in the speaking list. You're moving on. We have a valid motion on extending the meeting to 8:30, motioned by Catherine, seconded by Stephanie Yemo. You have a point of order from Sonia.
Yeah, so what Alora put in the chat is the motion that I proposed. It's not, I did not propose to extend it to 8:30. The one that is in the chat is what I proposed.
Yes, but that was not what Catherine moved. Unless I'm missing something.
No, I offered to consider the motion that was offered in a point, but decided instead to motion only for an extension to 8:30.
Excellent. Well, the motion on the floor is to extend to 8:30. Catherine, you are the mover. You are entitled to speak first to it. Would you like to offer anything for your motion? I realize that I basically invited you as chair. to do so. So I understand if you don't have much you wish to say to it.
I have one thing to say, which is I would encourage everybody to put down their hands and we can just vote to approve this extension and not debate it. That would be the most expedient way to extend the meeting.
Nicholas, you are next on the speaking list.
Thanks. I think I, in some ways, disagree with Catherine here. We've already extended by an hour to try and meet a compromise, and that was not gainfully achieved. It doesn't seem fair to necessarily extend indefinitely, even though I am known for loving the indefinite extensions. Many of our colleagues at this point are dropping off, and we should take this time as an encouragement to try and find a resolution that is positive for everyone, rather than simply move on and ignore the commitments that we've made, for instance, to individuals who may have to write exams now.
All right. Thank you for your contribution, Nicholas. Abigail, you are next on the speaking list. Someone enable Abigail's mic, please. Thank you. Abigail, you should now be able to unmute yourself.
Thank you. Yeah, this meeting has taken a while, and I think there was a lot of great discussion. I think it would be best to vote on these bylaws soon. And although I came here specifically because of Resolution 5, I feel like if we extend conversation, it will just keep getting extended on this point, and I feel like it would be better to put it at the beginning of another meeting.
I was not agreeing to what you were saying. Sorry, I was just going to remark also that I figured there were a lot of people who are feeling like they want to get through issue 4. Just a reminder that you do have an option to call a question on a main motion as well. That is just a free piece of reminder in case you wish to. Alora, you are next on the speak.
Hello, thank you. I also recognize, yeah, we've gone 150% almost over the time allotted for this meeting. There has been lots of great discussion, and that is what we need in democracy. So perhaps if we end the meeting at 8, we can schedule another meeting that has enough time to discuss both the approval of the bylaws and the member proposals that are brought up. So I would encourage people to vote against this motion of extending the meeting. We have places to be. I'm getting hungry, and that's never good. So I vote that we chop this meeting at 8 p.m. Thank you so much.
Nathaniel, you are next on the speaking list.
Hi. I just want to say that, like, if we keep extending this indefinitely, it's just going to set a precedent for, like, these meetings not getting anywhere and people getting frustrated for a really long time and staying on for a long time just for something to not happen. So I think we should try to set a precedent for these meetings either ending when they're supposed to end, or being extended once and then sticking to that, and then scheduling another meeting to finish it off. Because as it stands, I think people just get the feeling that these meetings don't really get places, and it just leaves everyone frustrated, which makes these sorts of meetings have a sour taste in everybody's mouth, which means that people don't want to show up. And if we want representation, then we want to make sure that these meetings get what they are intended to get done at the right time. And if they don't, they end when they're supposed to end. Otherwise, people are going to be like, do I stick around really long? Do I not?
Abhiraj.
Thank you, Matthew. I'd like to call the question, please.
All right, we have a seconder from Ben. Thank you. All right, if you would like to vote in favor of ending debate on the extension to 8:30 and just move to a vote on extending to 8:30, please raise your hand before 7:55:30. And please, if you have a proxy, make sure that that is into Mr. Sameta by 7:57. Again, vote in favor if you want to move to voting on the 8:30 extension. That is what a yes vote will do here. A no vote, which we will take in a little bit, will say you want to continue debate on whether we should extend the meeting. All right, I have 25 in favor of ending debate. Please I have 26. Please lower your hands now. And if you are opposed to ending debate on this, and you wish to continue debating, please raise your hand before 7:56:45. Again, you are raising your hand if you want to continue debating, extending to 8:30. All right, you have 5 seconds. I have 6 again. Mike, if you would like to tally up, I would appreciate it. And because I suspect that this will pass, and I will also tell people if you have a proxy for the purposes of extending to 8:30, you may as well just start submitting them right about now-ish. Just make sure you include in the email that it is for extending the 8:30 vote, not for calling Congress. And we will disregard those proxy votes, of course, if this vote fails. We're just trying to move stuff along because that seems to be the only thing that everyone in this room agrees on. Which is a great thing to agree on. I had a 13-hour meeting once. It was not pleasant. Mike, do we have a tally? Well, I'm not saying that you agree with things moving on, Nick. I think I was saying things being expedient no matter what.
Calling the question being voted on, 16 for, 2 against, 1 abstaining. Sorry, 3 against. 3 against.
That is clearly over the 2/3 threshold. We will move immediately to voting on extending to 8:30. I haven't opened voting yet, so Alora, what was your point of personal privilege? We can't change the vote tally after we've stated the results. So actually, it would not change the out. It would not change the outcome of the vote anyway. However, I will change the tally in recognition of that when I state the vote. What we are currently on, we are now going to be voting. In favor will mean extending to 8:30. Voting against will mean the end time still remains at 8. Voting has opened. Voting is open.
There's a point of order.
We can't take the point of order yet.
Sorry.
That's fine. Jay, I apologize. Laura, I apologize, but once voting is open, you should generally not be taking points. Great. So, vote in favor before 8:01 if you would like to extend to 8:30. And please get your proxy votes in by 8:02. when we return, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 people on the speakers list. So in half an hour, you folks can do the math about what you need to average to finish that debate in time. Of course, we might call the question early. And also there's still another motion to deal with. But just keep in mind the amount of time that we'll have left. We will probably be having another vote like this in half an hour. All right, you have 20 seconds. If you wish to extend to 8:30, please raise your hand. Five seconds. All right, please lower your hands. I have 17 in favor. Raise your hand if you would like to vote against the motion. That is, the time on the agenda shall continue to say 8 o'clock. And for reference, this is a 50% motion. And please finish that voting by 8:02. Sorry, you have 10 seconds. I realize I didn't give you a time up front. Maybe I'll give you an extra 15 seconds in light of that. So by 8:02:15, raise your hand if you would like the time on the agenda to continue to say 8 p.m. All right, I have 26 against. We will wait for the proxies to be tallied.
Seeing no new emails, I have 7 against extending and 13 in favor of extending.
Okay, so that is a total of 30 in favor and 33, 33 against. The motion fails. The time on the agenda will remain 8 p.m. And I now have a point of order from Jay.
Yes.
Can we have the chat turned back on as well, please?
Sorry, can I say my PO or?
Yes.
It's more like a POI now. Then could you please inform the assembly what's gonna happen if we end the meeting now?
If you end the meeting now, my understanding, and I'll let Ben fill in after this, will be that neither motion 4 nor 5 will be debated any further, nor will the new bylaws take effect. The organizations will still be bound by the Ontario Nonprofit Corporations Act, but any place where that doesn't conflict with the current bylaws, those will continue in place. Elections would have to happen before September 1st, as Benjamin previously stated, unless another special meeting is called and this is all debated again. I will let Ben chime in if there is anything else he wants to add on the effects before I resolve this point of information.
Yes, Matthew is correct. The organization would be bound to hold an election before the 1st of September. The new bylaws would not come into effect without a vote in favor by this meeting presently assembled. Yeah, that's pretty well all there is to say.
And Ben will be very sad, but that is the nature of general meetings like this. All right, we now have a Laura for a point of information.
Hi, just point of order. We were informed at the beginning of this meeting that it would be cut off directly at 7, which was amended to 8. And I would like to ask the chair what time it is and ask the current chair what happens at this time.
I will take this as your point of order, not your point of information. The orders being that this meeting adjourns at 8 p.m., it being 8:05. The time elapsed has gone over. We have gone over the time elapsed. Therefore, I declare this meeting adjourned.
Good night, folks.
Point of order, you need a motion to adjourn. We
You
don't
do
have
not.
a motion to
Motion to adjourn, but you can't do
No.
a point of information.
You do not need a motion to adjourn in the case of a fixed time to.
Sorry.
So the meeting is terminated. You're all in a room with no authority any longer, is my understanding.
Well, thanks for coming out, everyone, and we'll see you in about a month, apparently.
What I will say, if there is anybody who has a point of order, I mean, it no longer will have any force, but I can certainly answer your questions about what has happened.
I think I'm next on the list, right?